And then skills ranked players ranked by skill. So we want to make sure that we get the right players in the right spots. And the nice part of this is this really gets into the whole Moneyball concept, because I had two players early on in the tryout, and one girl was very, very athletic. And so in the receive drills, she looked great. Just great position, get to the ball, The other girl was very unathletic looking, a little bit slow, and then she was okay. The problem was when you chart with stats, they were like night and day different. Okay, the girl that was athletic was about 30% error rate passer. And a girl who looked like she was doing nothing could actually see the ball early and was already there. With the other girls making this dynamic move to the ball, and the other girl had already moved over here because she knew where the ball was as soon as it came out of the hitter's hands, the server's hands, right? And she was about a 10% error rate passer. Night and day difference. And so as the season went on, I started gathering statistics like, wow, I can't have that girl passing. This is the one I need, in the middle of the court, hitting the ball.
You said you wrote an article about tryouts. Do you use a stat program or during your tryouts as well?
I do not use a stat program. What I do is charting on a whiteboard.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that in a bit. All right, so the plus minus points, and every stat product should do this, and you can actually do this manually. If you score your points and say, who did what. The problem with the hand thing is that you got to hand aggregate all that, and so it's kind of a pain. The stat programs will do this. SoloStats will definitely generate this report for you. And the key thing that you have to do is to make sure that you compare people in like positions. Right? As an example, middle blockers to middle blockers, outside hitters who go all the way around with outside hitters who go all the way around. Okay? Because if you don't, the back half of the play is all error-based. It's all big errors, so forth. Okay? The front side is all about attacks and making points. So as an example, your DSs will have high negative numbers, and your liberos will have higher negative numbers because they're in twice as often. Right? And the only way they score positive points is if they attack the ball or they serve bases. And usually that doesn't measure out compared to the number of balls that they miss. Okay? And it's not a bad thing, it's just you have to compare like players. So here we have two outside hitters, right? Christine, who's at 2.2, a net 2.2, right? She's earned 5.6 and had minus 3.0 errors. These are probably a combination of a missed hit combined with a couple of loose digs. Okay. And so these are the two players there. They're doing okay. They're in the positive column. The middles, Allie at the top here is at 1.1, and then we've got Madison at minus 0.4 and Sydney at minus 0.3. Okay. So the question is, are these the right players playing positions? Right? Now in my case, I already knew who these people were, so I was able to bring them on and put them in position because those two girls go to the Nationals every year, and they turn out they have the best passing numbers, serving numbers, hitting numbers, and digging numbers. The only thing they don't do well in the setting for the side. They have a center feed down. Okay. So those numbers don't surprise me. On the blocking side, it's interesting to see that Sydney, who's pretty small, she's only 5'8", is a pretty effective hitter where Madison is not. So she makes up for any kind of blocking in this with being able to attack the ball. Right? So on the margin, she's a better player than him. Okay. So this is the first phase of picking who's the right person. If you see somebody who you think is supposed to be really good and they got a negative number up there, you're really be thinking about, is this the right choice? Now in the case of DSs, you have to rank them in a different standard. Okay. So we talked about this, and again, defensive specialists will have negative numbers, so you need some digging stats to really figure out who's doing a good job. Questions? Okay, so now we're going to look at each skill. And within our product, we have a table in web reports that is player ranking by skill. Okay, so it breaks out into each skill category. The first one is serve, and we use point scoring as our mechanism for judging that. So point score we talked about, how many times you hold that serve. Okay, and lots of times on the team, you just look at the attempts, you'll see that there's one player that serves a lot of balls every season. And the reason is they have a high point scoring number. Right? Well, the person next to them serves twice and has a 50% point score. This person consistently serves 3 times. Okay? So they get 2 points and then they get a side on. Right? But if you add that up for the season, all of a sudden that person's got a lot more serves. And that's the person you want in there as your primary server. Or again, if you have your best set of servers, you want them up front. The other thing to look at, and my team in particular, so these two players didn't serve much. They only went in and served against not so great opponents, so the numbers are high. But starting from number 6 on down, these are primary players. And the numbers are all over 50, so it's pretty tightly clustered. Most teams are a little bit more spread out than that. Once these numbers get tight, start looking at two other things. One is the error rate, and the other is number of aces. Okay, because that'll tell you a little bit about who to use in what situation. So for example, if the score is 24-25, and you have to serve, I don't think you're going to want Sadie to be serving the ball. She's at 15%. I think the person you really want is somebody like a Danny at 4.7%. So know that number, because that person on the bench may really be able to help you. I had one girl who consistently got called at the hard times, but I was very confident of her because her number was under 4% errors. Right? So every time she tells me, she's very nervous when she goes back there. But I know what her mechanics are like, and she's calm enough that she can get that ball in a period of time and serve a decent speed ball. Doesn't have to be an ace. Right? We just need to have the game in place so that we can play it out. Right? So she's the one put in there. Now, the opposite of that is the catch-up player who has maybe a decent point scoring number but a high error rate, and that player on my team was probably Christine. 10% is not bad. Lots of aces. Okay? So that's the kind of player you want as your catch-up player. So if you're down, 6, 7 points, man, you hope that person comes around the rotation or bring them off the bench. And just, get some really tough serve. See if you can do some catch-up. Okay. So these comments are a little bit my opinion, and you can agree or disagree, but I'll offer them because I think they need to. And these two comments are almost opposed to each other. The first one is coaches aren't demanding enough of their servers. And what I mean by that is I don't see coaches getting upset enough over these specific events. The first one is serving balls into the net. When you haven't made a short serve call and just walking that ball in the net. Okay? This is something I train my team out. I serve out the back of the court. We're going to serve hard. Make it just enough to clear the net. And I'd rather have it go long, because in a hot game where people are going crazy, right? 1 in 3 long serves gets touched because everybody's amped up. They can't help themselves, right? It's like, oh my God, and they kick the ball. The ball's probably going to be 3, 4 feet out. Right? So it better be long. The next one is serve error coming out of timeout. Right? To me, that's completely unforgivable. That's why they call the timeout on the other side. I prefer my person just underhand serve the ball at that point. Let the other side work it out rather than just give it away. Right? Because I see the server. Come on, that's what you're there for. So every time they call a timeout, we come back into the huddle. I tell my server, okay, you know what you have to do. And we practice a thing called 100% serve. 100% serve is 80% power, 100% in. And we literally practice blind serving sometimes. It's like the Zen art of serving, close your eyes and serve the ball. If your mechanics are good, you can do that. Right? If you're not tossing the ball crazy high, you can actually do that. Try it yourself. Okay? Most of us have been playing long enough that our mechanics are good enough. I guarantee you, if you do this thing like this with your eyes closed, right, you can probably put in half the balls. And that's the way the mechanics should be with the players. Okay? First serve error out of a difficult side out, right? You had 5 balls already took before you sided out. And now the person goes back and chucks the ball down. Right? Completely unforgivable. Kills your momentum. Just morale killer. And finally, right, second or third serve miss in a row. Okay, another momentum killer. Right? If they're doing something that you're asking them, maybe that's okay. But the players have to think about what's already happened and use some judgment there, right? About how to maintain momentum on the court. And that's another part of volleyball IQ that you have to instill in them. On the other side of it, coaches are too direct in calling targets and reduce effectiveness. Now, I live right next door to Stanford. I watch the team, and I see coaches calling numbers, and it's shocking how many times they do this and they get that. Right? And this is a team that serves a lot of balls at practice all the time. I mean, they dedicate like hours serving the ball. Okay, and they got the radar guns and everything else going with the speed, the zones, and all this kind of stuff. Stat knowledge job. And boy, the number of balls that don't put in the right spot is amazing. All right? So the other problem is that, coach goes like that or big like that, and they put it on just a baby serve that the other side just picks up and just, puts it down the throat. Okay? And finally, the player tries to force the ball they're not very good at, and it goes out. Right? Yes?
So do you not call targets for your players? No. Never.
Well, not never. There are times when I will call, but generally I don't. And these articles are very interesting reads. And the reason is that Tom Black, I think it was at UC San Diego, basically said that I would rather see a very tough serve go to the wrong passer than an easy serve go to the right passer. Okay? Because the problem with these games is the differential in passing is not so high that a good passer won't make a mistake if you serve tough. And it's much better to have the server concentrate and not get disrupted than to have them sort of get off kilter and say, oh my God, get nervous, oh I can't serve that ball over there. I'd rather have them comfortable. And for me, I always encourage the server, when they go back there, I say, take your time, get a good toss. And I remind that to my players all the time. It's all the way up to the varsity levels, I remind them. And I find that it's much better to do that to get them calm than to say, go do this or go do this. Okay, so it's your choice. Again, it's my own personal preference. But what I see is when you call zones, I see a lot of balls that either don't hit the zone or hit so easy that it's not effective. The other side just gets up there and passes the ball. Say, oh, thank you, free ball. So what's the point of doing that? I'd rather see a 42-mile-an-hour ball go into the 5-6 or 1-6 zone between the passers. And that's a very hard ball to put on. Right? Once it gets over 40, balls don't come back. They tend to go straight up. Okay, so serving the odds. Here's the other thing. You've got to know what your opponent is doing. And this is where the stat programs really help out. Because in-game you can tell, what are they siding out at and what are you siding out at? Right? Or maybe you just know the opponent. Okay? If the opponent is under 50% as a siding out team, it doesn't make any sense to sit there and try to serve aces. Okay? It's much better to let them play the ball out because you got better than 50-50 chance that they're going to just, implode themselves. They're going to hit the ball out. Right? They hit the ball in net. Right? They'll do something bad on their side of the court, so let them play the ball. I see it's happening a lot where we play a good team and they're playing us like we're as good as them, and they're trying to serve aces. And they just have a bad streak, and all of a sudden, guess what? One ace, 5% improvement. One error, 5% improvement on my side, Another error, another 5%. Now, I'm at a 60% side out rate. I'm competitive with them. They're making me competitive, right? By using a tactic that's not necessary against a team like me, where they're better than that. Right? So don't do that on your side. Teach your players how to modulate. You want to serve really tough against an opponent that's superior to you. You have to do that because they will just attack the crap on that. And you will lose that game if you don't push them back into the court. And the other thing is, there's ace serving and there's out-of-system serving, right? The key thing you want to look at in your players is, how many of those passes don't break the 10-foot line? Because it's very subtle. And I watch videos very carefully, and I see a player serve a ball, and one of my players only had like a 5% or less ace rate. She also had less than a 5% error rate, but the balls that would come off of her serve that looked like nothing wouldn't break the 10-foot line. So the setter's running off the net, dropping behind the 10, and setting from there. And guess what? Not enough out-of-system practice. That set's coming from the 10 at a weird angle, and then it's landing probably at least 5 feet behind the net, off the net. Right? The hitter goes up and buries the ball into the net. And they take a swing like it's a regular set. Right? So those little subtleties matter. And so really think about what your servers are doing. Again, we talked about 80% power, 100% accuracy serve. Okay? And I do a pressure drill in this particular one where all the players line up and I blow the whistle and they have to serve the ball at some number. Like we have a radar gun, so it's like got to be over 35 miles an hour to get the ball. Right? 80% power, 100% serve. And 12 players go through, and if anybody misses, we either do the penalty right then and there, or we can double down on the penalty. So the 12 rounds start, we're trying to get to 100% serve with every teammate watching the other teammate, encouraging them, right? But it's in front of your teammate, and it's like a little bit of pressure there, okay? Because if you fail, the entire team has to do the consequences. Right? So that's a way of teaching a mindset where you can put the ball in when it matters. If you don't teach that, it's not going to happen in the game, right? Everything's got to be taught. Okay, receiving side, the key thing about receiving, and this stat to me is one of the most important ones, if you don't take the stat, you really don't know. This is like the batting average problem. You can't watch a player, hit three, get up to base 3 times and figure out what the batting average is. It doesn't work that way, right? You've got to see lots of hits. Same thing with the receive. And this is where, from the tryout perspective, get a whiteboard, right? Put in 10 columns and the rows of the players. Okay? And then every pass, you just mark it in. It's a 1, it's a 0, it's a 2, whatever. After 10 passes, you just add them up, divide by 10, that's your passing rate, right? And so that'll tell you pretty quickly who's good and who's not so good. If you do that 5 times, so between 4 and 50 passing attempts will start to give you statistically consistent numbers. Right? And the key thing you want to know is not just the rating, but look at the error rates. Because that's very, very important to figure out what kind of passer you want. Right? So we'll jump into another example here. Okay, who's the best passer? Right? So you got some high numbers, and some low numbers, and some low error rates, and some higher error rates. Right? Who's the best passer? The answer is it depends. Okay? It depends on your team. And the best example was last year's Division I championship between Texas and Oregon. How many of you guys saw that game? Okay, so if you can go back and do a reboot on that, or go find it on the web or something, it's amazing to watch. Right? The reason is Oregon is super fast. That setter launches the ball at a rate I've never seen before. She literally bats the ball. That's how hard she's setting that ball. And it's flat. I mean, that ball has almost no arc as it goes outside. Right? Texas is the exact opposite. Texas looks like an old Russian team. 35 feet up in the air. Okay, just chuck it to the outside and let the outside hitters take care of it. Just 11 feet up there, boom. With a block into the court. Right? So, if you take those 2 examples, who's the best Texas passer?
No, Sally.
No, best Texas passer is Sam. Why? 2% error rate, right? All the center needs is the ball someplace up in the air that they can get to. Lots of 2 balls are fine, because we're not running the 1. Okay, we don't need accuracy, we just need height. Okay, she's going to run with the ball and chuck it out there. It's not a big technique play, right? In the case of Oregon, the best passer is Sally, because she's got a low error rate and a slightly worse pass rate. Okay? So that's how you have to think about your numbers. You think about the systems you run, the kind of attack patterns you need, and so where do you want to go? If you're primarily an outside hitting team, then look for low error rate passers, right? And then think about their accuracy level, which is measured in the rating. Okay? Again, if you stack the players, you'll start to find out pretty quickly. Now, here's the other issue. You typically only have a couple of good passers. And teams that have 3 to 4 good passers, you're very, very fortunate. But the reality is anything after 4 tends to drop off a cliff. And what I mean by that is the error rates go up dramatically. Okay? So you really have to track these numbers, because here's my favorite, right? Teams that use 5 to 6 different passers. I love those teams, because I know one of those passers sucks. It's just statistically a reality. Or they all suck, if they're all doing it. Okay? So this is the reality of knowing your numbers. People who do this kind of stuff, like for example, I see a lot of teams that pull the opposite back and pass because they want the center in a better position. It makes the rotational alignments a little easier, right? I look at those teams and say, yeah, but can that opposite really pass? Because if she can pass, why is she an opposite? Why didn't she be the outside hitter? Right? So you gotta kind of challenge these things that people do that out there. You see little oddball plays going on. Are they really optimized, or are they just doing something convenient? And I would wager that on average, they're probably doing something convenient, not statistically good. I'd rather have a more sort of complex receive pattern that puts the best people in the right spots than to do something convenient where people are standing in a better place. Okay? So think about that a little bit as you go through this. The other important thing is, going from 10% error rate to 20% error rate is not 10% worse. It's twice as bad, right? So you're going to receive the ball 20 times, and 10% error rate says what? How many errors? 2 points, right? 10% times 20 is 2 points. 20% error rate means you're going to lose 4 points, okay? If you lose 2 more points in a match, what just happened? Right? You can turn around a 25-21 win, right, into a 21-25 loss, because these are double swings. Right? Rally scoring isn't 1 point. 1 point is 2 points, right? I don't get a point. You get the point. Okay? So it's really, really sensitive. You can see situations where the team has a lead and all of a sudden, boom, the other team catches up. A couple of little errors. Right? So be really, really careful, particularly in this area. and error rates matter in the passes. Okay. All right, hitting. This is a suggestion I just had because in solo stats and any other app, you can actually just score the end of rally point, which is easier than doing all the rally stuff, right? And you can still get a good proxy for hitting. In our case, we do a thing called net kills per game. And that's kills minus errors per game rather than attempts, okay? And it's a rough approximation, but if you look at these numbers, which is what they are, a little bit different than the hitting efficiencies, it'll give you a rough idea of who's the best hitter and who's the worst, because the numerator is the same. Hitting efficiency is kills minus errors over attempts. So if your kills are exceeded by your errors, right, you start going with negative numbers. So you're close to 0 or negative, that's not a good hitter. And that's what will be represented here. So at the bottom, Meg's at 0.2, right? Or maybe that person's at minus 0.1. It'll be the same kind of number in hitting efficiency standpoint, right? So you can get that ranking of the hitters kind of for free, just by doing the rally stats. And in solo stats, you'll get that number, you know, as you push that through web reports. Okay? So that's a quick way of getting that number. I still prefer to have efficiencies because the number I care about a lot is kill percentage. This is a big deal. Because kill percentage really tells you about how effective you need to be. And depending on your level of play, kill percentage is what will determine the game. So as your level of play gets towards more advanced, right, it's not about error corrections, it's about point production. And so we'll talk about that in 1 second. We'll look at that situation. So who's the better hitter? Okay? So Meg is a 200 hitter, 60% kill rate, 6 kills, 4 errors, 10 attempts. Right? So 6 minus 4 is 2 over 10 is 200. Okay. Sam, 300 hitter, right? 30% kill rate, 3 kills,